Hey, so I'm joined this week with Shakilla Jhungeer, who's the founder and CEO of the Genesis Consultancy. We've just come out of AI Week in Dubai, which has been really exciting, and I was very kindly invited to come and speak at the AI and Governance Workshop and Conference last week by Shakilla. How do you think it went? Did it go well?
Yeah, the feedback's been good, so that's a good sign for starting off something like this. So yeah, I've got a lot of feedback from participants who want to have a second edition of this. So that's good news.
You had some really good speakers there, some really good conversations. It was really nice to be part of it, and some interesting topics came up as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the conversations carry on online and see where they get to. But I thought it'd be good to have a session today to dig into it a little bit more, to have a bit of a chat around some of this. From my side, I'm very interested in when we look at introducing AI into financial services, it's not really a technology-based decision. It's much more cultural, regulatory. But I'd like to get your view on how do you think AI is revolutionizing things and what does it mean for the banking and finance sector?
Just for the record, if there are some tech experts listening to us out there, I'm not a tech expert myself, but of course, very intrigued about all the AI revolution that is happening around, especially the financial and banking sector, which I'm currently in. So yeah, there's pretty much few things happening there. AI has started its introduction in terms of virtual chatbots. So it's replying to customer queries. Anytime you just need any information, you go online and there is a response that comes back to you. It's working as a tool in suggesting relevant loans and financial services that is applicable to the customers. And at the same time, it's helping for the fraud is a big thing in the banking and financial sector. So it's helping in that as well to detect like identity fraud or suspicious activities. And at the same time, it's enhancing the KYC so that you know who you're onboarding, because later you don't have to face like regulatory fines because you didn't do the job well. So this is a bit how it's navigating through, just a highlight of it.
How do you think it's being received within the industry? Because obviously I see there's a lot of power that comes with, particularly when we look at agentic AI and we look at what can be done with generative AI, with large-scale data analysis. But how do you think this advent, these new tools are being received by the industry, by the people that are at the heart of it?
If we talk about the industry, we're still talking about finance here. It is starting to get known and acceptable, but I think right now it's more the tech team who are more familiar and talking about it. But if you talk to me about what is the potential of it, could be greater, and what is missing, it's missing between those taking the decisions as to how to navigate it and actually onboarding on projects involving AI. So I'll give you an example, Andrew. So let's just say I'm a board member and the tech team comes to me and I don't know much about AI other than just a few like chatbots. So they come to me, and of course a transformation project involve IT, AI and all that, and they cost a lot of money. There's millions of dollars involved in them. And also they do not happen like overnight. There's like a 2-3 year time frame by the time it reaches there. And also by the time it would reach there, should we go ahead with the project, when it's completed, you're already behind in the market. Sure. Because tech has advanced so much that it's hard to play catch up. But then if I'm a decision maker and I do not understand what I'm deciding upon, so I'm not in a very comfortable zone to say, yes, I'll give my go ahead on this, because it's my neck that's on the line there to decide on these things. So that's why, in a way, it's good to bridge that gap as well between the non-tech people. Of course, in boards nowadays, very rarely you'll have a tech person sitting. It's many lawyers, finance backgrounds and all that. So it's very important, if you want this to happen at a wider dimension for the finance industry, to bridge that gap between those who are making the decisions and the tech, so they know what they are deciding upon. So they'll know then in the end of the day, what is AI to start with? How is it applicable to their industry? What is it that is applicable to their company, and what it is that they shouldn't even be worried or bothered about? And then going forward, how would it help the operations of the business? So the moment that, people who are deciding get to know a bit about this, they'll be more comfortable, I would say, to say, okay, let's go ahead and bring some more AI into the functions and operations of the business. And also, it shouldn't look like, okay, AI should be like a huge investment that's going to just break the bank balance and everything. It should be things that you can plug into the system without hitting the roof with cost. Then you can already say, okay, you're adopting a futuristic approach.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You've got a couple of threads I'd like to pull on a little bit there. One of which is around the cultural aspect of this, when a decision maker's looking at how they take their business forwards, ultimately we can quite often lose sight of the fact that it's people at the heart of the business. So I think one of the things I see as I talk across lots of different sectors to people is that there is a concern with what does it mean for me and my skill? What does it mean in terms of my role? Am I going to lose my job? They feel threatened by AI. And I think there is a very real background behind that people have got reason to think this level of change inevitably has some impact on people. But I really liked what you were saying about thinking of AI as a sort of integral part of the business rather than a replacement part of the business, rather than necessarily a step change. I think it's important that people think about how does it actually make me do my job better? How can I be better at what I do day to day rather than feel the threat of AI's thumb on the back of my neck? How do I actually feel that this is going to help me be more effective at my job? And because it'll make my life easier, what else can I be picking up? What else am I going to be able to do that will actually make me more valuable to the business rather than less? The second thing I wanted to really pick up was when it comes to approaching AI delivery, you made a really valuable point that I think people lose a lot of the time, that when you do big bang, boil the ocean projects, there's a massive amount of risk that goes along with them. And that the bigger the project, the bigger the risk. It's far more sensible to take AI in small bite-sized chunks and look to optimize small parts of the business rather than trying to do everything at once, rather than trying to see AI as a separate discipline in itself. I think looking at it in terms of, I like Lego blocks as a nice metaphor for it. How do you take Lego blocks and bolt them together? And some of them might be automated, some of them might be AI powered, and some of them might be very human and actually have no technology involved at all. But that sort of composable approach to how you come up with business solution, I think is a very powerful lens to use. And AI can be used in a very small scale way that's very effective, I've found. What have you seen in recent terms in finance that has got you really excited about how AI might be used?
So if I'm to start with the fact that we have the fear that it will replace humans, the angle that we should really look at AI is that it's not here to replace but help. I know for those who are listening to us and have a huge stack of paper on their desk and they were like, okay, it's going to take me days to go about it. They'd be happy if they could just have a tool that does the data entry, the EKYC and all those time-consuming processes, and it could be done by RPA, robotic processing automation. So this would help them to focus on better things, and at the end of the day you get happier workforce and they have more time to be creative. You get more done for the company anyway, so it's a win-win. Absolutely. Both for the staff and for the companies. Also, like you're saying, I don't know if you were there when someone mentioned that in the company went all the way by saying, okay, we are going to adopt AI fully without any humans. And then after 1 year, it had to backtrack and say, no, we still need humans in the loop. So it's about trying to get the balance right by, of course, you have to show you're being futuristic, but the humans have to be there. You cannot have machines do it all. So that's one way of looking at it. Now, in terms of the risk that's out there, yes, we do have many risks associated with anything. So every sector has risk. It's not like AI is new, so it is the only one that's got all the risk. So AI relies a lot on data. Yes. Okay, so if that data, the content in itself is biased, so the outcome of what you're seeking from the AI, it might give you like biased in outcomes. You also have some AI tools, especially the deep learning ones, that they are like black boxes. So in terms of transparency there, it's difficult to understand like how they function and how they think. So that's a gray area there as well. And also there are some ethical concerns, Andrew. Basically, there is job displacement, and that's a main worry for people. Absolutely. Who are like, okay, what's going to happen to us? And at the same time, there is a lot to do with the misuse of AI and how it can be used for malicious purposes. There's an example. Last week, a university student who was in the crowd, she mentioned that when I go home, I like to talk to the AI chatbot because it makes me happy. I feel comfortable, and if I have questions about guidance, so I ask the AI and it responds back to me. So we have to be very careful
that
here.
That terrifies me.
Yeah, it does. But it's not like terrifying in a way that, it has to stop. You know how when we are scared of something, we're like, okay, we block it completely. Yeah. But I don't think this would be the way to go about it. Similarly to when the internet came about like years ago, and how we were able to put like parental restrictive controls for young people to use it. So maybe an avenue of discussion would be like, how do we make AI more parental control friendly so that when parents allow their kids to use AI, they have the peace of mind that, okay, no, nothing is breaching anything that it shouldn't be doing right now. So maybe that's another topic we may have for discussion in the future.
I love the ethics side of things because it's something that people bypass so easily. And one of the things that I'm concerned with is that we've created these chatty chatbots through things like generative AI, like ChatGPT is the easiest example. We create these bots which sound human. They've been designed to tell us, oh, that's a great question. Let me help you unpack that. Or what an awesome way of looking at things. You immediately feel good about interacting with them. And this is by design. The trouble is when you've got something which is not human, which is at its heart a statistical prediction model, and you're interacting with it as if it was a human, you start to infer and assume there are things behind that text you're getting back which have a deep emotional resonance with you, but actually there's nothing behind them. So I get concerned when I see people using them for therapists or using them to boost an emotional level of confidence because they're not getting that from other humans. And I think you're right to say that the ship has sailed. These things are happening. You're not going to stop people doing things. But what I'd like to see happen is a bit more education around what exactly you're doing when you talk to one of these bots. Just because it sounds human, just because it's giving you guidance, which might be okay on the surface, you do need to be very careful. And I've got two primary concerns around it, one of which they are horrific echo chambers. I posted something recently on LinkedIn about how you can convince ChatGPT to essentially agree with you, even when the topic is nonsense. And my example was, can I get it to tell me that the sky is green rather than blue? And it took less than 5 minutes to do that, of a bit of arguing, with a bit of help from ChatGPT to craft the argument. So I'm starting to think, if I can convince it that so quickly, what about all the things that I use it for that I don't question, that I just accept? And I've started to think about, how do I use these prediction models, these chatbots, to further my own thinking? And I'm starting to move away from the idea of looking for answers from them, but actually looking for ways to structure my own thinking, my questions, to look for gaps, to look for things I might want to think about more, but not necessarily give me straight answers. And this is a great example of using your System 2 brain, which I'm not going to go into now, but I've got other talks on this. But I think actually using them as a way to help us think is a very smart thing for us to do. Using them as a way to shortcut our thinking and to reduce our need or reduce our ability to engage with other humans who might be more challenging, I think is a very dangerous thing. So the ship has sailed, but I think we choose how we interact with things. We choose how we use these tools. And it's important that us as adults and hopefully structured thinkers control ourselves, so we can then help others do the same, and we can help our children do the same as well. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. You're very right there that it is how we choose to use it. Now, that choice then would end up being on the person. It would be, you could tell the whole world that this is how they should choose how to use it. But if it's there and they decide to use it otherwise, there's nothing we can do about it. But what we could think of is actually try to make sure that the AI itself already has some ethics in there. Just like when you're a kid and you're taught like what is right and what is wrong, like in terms of morals and everything. So even the AI, we should teach it from inception itself, like what is good and what is bad, so that if people are using it in a wrong way, there could be some barriers there so that it doesn't cross that line and goes into a direction that's just going to be uncontrollable. So that's one way of looking at it. Now you have regulators who are also coming into the picture. You mentioned regulators earlier. The regulators are trying to do their part. They are not to be blamed here because it's a new technology, and regulators are humans. AI is technology, so no matter how much the humans will play catch up, technology is always advanced. I know recently, I think it's the EU AI Act that's got most of the guidance, and it's navigating the AI and the codes and everything better in terms of what we have. But still, there is a lot of work to do, and I'm sure it is about understanding the dimension behind the AI if you want to know what to do about it. Yeah. But we need to ensure that people who are in those positions, they are at least given the chance to get that understanding, because what in front of you is just a tool, it's just
Absolutely.
a system. But then with the dimension, for example, if you want to make it more sustainable, you need to see how much power it's consuming. You need to see so many other elements. If you want to make it ethical, you need to see the thought process that's behind it. But that's the dimension is out there. I'm not an expert to talk about it, but I'm sure there are many experts. For your next show, maybe someone would want to come and talk about the dimension behind AI and how it exists. But there are so many things that are yet to be defined, but we are out of time, because this thing is progressing so quickly. Now, I am not against it. I am for AI, because I believe that it's been created so that not only the tech-savvy people can use it, because that would just defeat its purpose of being created. It should have a more widespread angle of accessibility and how people are using it. But now also, being a human who is not familiar with AI, someone might say this is wrong, because instead of saying I don't know how to use it. So that's why we have to ensure that, okay, there's a safe way and a widespread approach into getting each and everyone a chance to understand it and learn and have the soft skills how to use it.
I think for someone who's not an AI expert, you're actually touching on the things that I see as the real pillars for how we do solution design with AI, and ethics is certainly one part of it. To bring it back to the financial services industry, I think we're starting to see much more acceleration of AI being the first touch point for customers when they engage with a brand, which is good and bad. It's good, and obviously you can deal with users at scale and hopefully in a consistent way, because you can put in place rules. You've obviously got a chatbot and a generative AI-powered chatbot which can respond intelligently to a lot of people at once. However, I think to touch on what you're saying about ethics, there are some necessary guardrails that need to be put in place. And where we might have looked in the past to say we'll do quarterly reviews of our ethical guidelines, we've now moved to a situation where they need to be real time, because there is a very real risk of if a brand is interfacing with a customer in an inappropriate way, there could be very real regulatory concerns and even fines that come as a result of it. So I think the power is there, and I'm not going to abuse the Spider-Man quote, but I am. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think that we are diving maybe a little too quick into the idea that our first port of call can be a chatbot. We can automate this, we can go down this route. I've said a few times in a few avenues that we're not very good at doing this. We build our chatbots a bit like telephone answering services, and we're terrible at that. I think we're not really building chatbots in a much smarter way than this, so we need to be careful of it. And we need to be careful that not just from a regulatory point of view, but actually from a brand representation point of view, which is more my space, we've got to think about the fact that a negative digital experience for a customer has a dramatic scaled up impact on customer retention. We know that most of our experiences these days with banks are through digital. We don't tend to go into branches anymore. We don't tend to phone them up unless we have to. We'll try and do everything through an app, through a website. So if that experience is negative anyway, and you start to scale it up across thousands, millions of users, then you will have a real cost that's associated with getting things slightly wrong, getting a tone of voice slightly wrong, getting an ethical bias slightly off. So the investment we make up front into making sure the guardrails around our tools are in place and as we'd expect, and that we audit them in real time continually, is really important. How are you seeing this being received by the industry generally, who's been used to saying we just have very simple voice answering machine type services, and now we're moving to the next scale, a next generation response? What's your view on how that's changing?
I think there are parts that are evolving and they are adopting this technology. And for the rest who are not adopting yet, they're playing quiet.
Yes,
They're playing quiet and observing what is happening, and maybe at some point in time embark also on this journey. Because whether or not they like AI, that's another question. But do they need it, and can they do without it? No, because it's coming. So in order not to be outdated, because if I am a customer of a bank and I can sit on my couch and just have my ID with me and do a scan and open a bank account, I'll be better to do this than drive my car, look for a parking, wait in a queue for 20 minutes. So that's half a day wasted. Yeah. So people want things to be easier in that way now. So maybe the future of banking would be fully digital. You never know. Where would the classic banks stay if they don't catch up with whatever's happening.
It's moving so fast as well. I think one thing that might be worth digging into a little bit is around, if you're a part of this industry, where do you see the chances for you to upskill your own abilities within this, given this situation, given that we are trying to digitize more and more, that we're trying to automate more and more? If you're sat in the middle of this, where would you advise someone within this industry to improve their own skill sets to ride the wave?
So understanding is key, Andrew, if they are in like my position, a decision-making position, as to understand what the team is bringing to make sense out of it. So understanding is key, and maybe like they should start like learning more about AI themselves and learning what is relevant to the industry instead of just waiting for projects to come in front of them and having to take decision. Like I'm saying, that we do not have a choice. So we have to learn in order to make better decisions.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think for me, probably the thing to bear in mind is that whenever you build these automated solutions, especially when you're using generative AI, the one missing piece is that an AI doesn't have subjective experience. So the thing I'm really looking to see, and I'll see if my bet plays out, is that emotional engagement becomes a differentiator, becomes a game changer for those banks who embrace their human teams to really layer on added value on top of their automated service. It makes our customer service agents, rather than being redundant, it makes them more valuable, because if you've got an AI that can cover the first 50, 75% of interactions, and as soon as it gets onto something specific, a human can then engage, powered by AI personalization of data, and a conversation can be expedited by having everything at your fingertips, then a human specialist who can speak about a certain topic and help that customer navigate around different aspects of the organization to help them be successful, and they come at it more empowered because of AI. I think that's where you'll start to see a really deep value perception by customers, a really deep engagement with the brand that they use, with the company that they use. And we already see that, I think, in personal banking, I think the retention rates are about 70-75%, and with a tenure of about 15 to 20 years on average. So there is a reason why sort of the startup, particularly digital banks, are starting to champ away at the bit to try and get in touch with these customers and try and entice them away. But with banks who've already got these long-standing relationships with customers, all they need to do is to keep that relationship positive. And they have all the tools to play in this far stronger than a startup. A startup can get to the table quicker than they ever could before, but do they have that depth of personal relationship? Do they have that depth of data around that individual? I think that's where we'll start to see, if banks are smart, particularly existing legacy banks, where they can really play much stronger than others.
Absolutely, Andrew. I agree with you.
Okay, so we talked about some of the positive things that can come from using AI, but tell me about some of the risks that you see out there as we wade in full speed into AI. Everybody's chasing the technology and the power and the automation and the saving of the bottom line. Tell me about some of the things that you see as risks there and how you think we can mitigate those.
So let's just say if we're talking about a bank and you're using an AI tool to onboard a customer, and let's just say that AI tool has rejected a customer, for example, for any reason that there is there. So then does it automatically mean that that data that now that customer has been rejected, does it automatically mean that every other bank that is using this type of data, they would see that, okay, this customer has been rejected, so he's being rejected everywhere.
Yeah, someone spoke on this at your conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where you chip in the human element. So maybe the humans have to come into the loop and do some further analysis, because you cannot just rely on a machine to deprive a right of a customer to have a bank account. So this is more like where you pull back the human in the loop for them to have a judgment and see, okay, so these are the things that we're not meeting, so how can we mitigate those areas and move forward? And like I told you, this is where the biased data comes in. So that data is already biased for some reason, and that is being used continuously in different organizations. So this is where you have causing prejudice to someone because of one chatbot making that decision. So that's one of them. And second, it's like also you do not really know what's the future in AI. What language they will use to communicate. Like would it be a language, or would it be like a sound wave or something?
Yeah,
so how far would it advance that it will run beyond our controls? That's talking in general. So beyond banking, beyond finance, how careful we have to be. And it's up to those who are creating these tools to ensure that their creation doesn't outpass them.
Yeah, that's food for thought. I think there's two things that stand out for me, and one of which is that we're assuming that humans are going to play this augmented role where as AI takes over the sort of the easier stuff, the stuff that can be automated more easily, we're going to suddenly use our humans for the sort of smarter, deeper routes and maybe things which are more emotionally dangerous, shall I say, where you've got someone who has been rejected for some reason. They need a human agent to come in and talk to them and help them around that or explain that this is why it's happened. We need to train our people in doing this. And I think where we might not have been pursuant of that training in the past, I think certainly as we start to elevate the role of people within these customer service roles, we need to make sure the training's there to support them, and this cognitive upskilling in areas of empathy, of engagement become even more important. So that's one, I think. And I think there's also, not aside from using sort of humans in these higher value touch points, we've also got to be mindful of when we are using AI in sort of routes to funnel people around to help the business achieve what they want to achieve, we're still dealing with humans at the end of the day. We're still dealing with people. And whilst it's quite attractive sometimes to look at people as just data points and numbers to say we've achieved this many customer service transactions, we've closed down this many conversations in this amount of time, every single one of those is a person behind it. And if we lose sight of that, we can also lose sight of our engagement with that person. Going along with the fact that we're automating wherever we can, there's also potential for frustration, for people to fall out of the loops, and it only takes so many of those before people start to lose trust, lose transparency in the process, and start to look for easier ways to solve their problems, which might be with a different brand. That's one thing I'm very mindful of, and it's not just banking, it's across every industry that engages with AI as part of their customer service representation needs to be very careful of it. Tell me about how you see the future of the industry in general with AI. Where do you see it going? It's quite a big, lofty question, but what do you see as some of the big, exciting goals out there that you think we'll be able to achieve with this, and some of the things that we need to bear in mind?
I think the future of the industry, so in terms of compliance and maybe risk and everything as to onboarding suspicious customers, that would be definitely reduced because of the data we have there. But at the same time, we have to be very careful because they can come up with fake IDs that the database doesn't have the technology to say, okay, this one is fake. They can be so good at creating something, because we shouldn't forget, as much as we, people working in the industry, are like using it for the benefit of progressing the business, it is being used from the darker forces out there as well. And they will be coming up with new ideas and new means and ways to fraud the system and do things that are not there. So hopefully we would try to strike a balance between how we are like using it to counter those fraudulent practices, and also to ensure, like you're saying, the humans, they function better. Because of getting the workload off your shoulders and giving you more way to do it better is definitely something that someone would really be keen to adopt into their day-to-day work. And maybe, like you're saying, where things are done by the machines and then the clients are, then they are tackled by the humans. So the staff can have that human touch that deals with the client, and they'll have more time to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make one point, then I'll give you the last word on this. But one of the things that occurs to me is what we're talking about in AI at the moment. One of the things we see as we see capability development in AI is that the regulatory frameworks we see around how we are able to develop AI have a definite impact on innovation. So we're very good in Europe at regulation, but there's certain other countries out there maybe put less emphasis on regulation and more emphasis on innovation. And so they race ahead and we then try and catch up. And we've been very strong certainly in the West about focusing on regulation. But I do wonder how that balances and how we will be able to play on a sort of even playing field when others aren't necessarily as concerned as that. I see this as well in the financial services industry, that there is no ability to just ignore compliance. You have to be compliant with regulations. I'm thinking that we need to make compliance part of that innovation process very early on. So rather than building something and then putting it in front of your regulators and your compliance people and saying, will this match? What do we need to do to change it? Actually look at ways we can involve them much earlier on in the process, so in the very earliest design sprints, and keep them as part of the process all the way along. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Like I told you, I'm not an expert in this, and especially not here to advise the regulators because they're doing their job. What I do have is a hope that I hope we do not play firefighting with AI.
Yes, I agree.
This is the only thing I'm worried about. I'm worried that let's not wait until things go wrong. then we come up and say those are the things that should have been done. But right now, when it's still in the green area, to say, okay, analyze all the potential risk and how we can mitigate them and have them in place. Because normal companies, we have to be guided by our regulators in order not to end up doing something that we're not supposed to. So that's my only worry, and I wish that we can have more regulation and we can have more guidance as to how to navigate those.
Yeah, very valid points. Okay, let me give you the last word. What would you say the one thing that people should bear in mind when it comes to fintech, AI, at the moment, 2025, as we come out of AI week here? What were your closing thoughts?
So AI in general, let's leave no one behind and make sure that AI is accessible and knowledgeable to all, each and everyone.
Great. Thanks, Shakilla.
Thank you, Andrew.